so many things you can't control. The only thing you can control is the gun that you're carrying, the ammunition that you have in the gun, and your skill with the gun. Those are the only three things that you can control in a gunfight, and your own physical conditioning. Those are the things you can control. Everything else is out of your control.
Hi folks, Tim Sundles here with Buffalo Bore Ammunition, and got my special guest for our very first podcast. And I wanted our first guest and our first podcast to be the kind of person that we would probably do more podcasts with in the future. I wanted somebody super knowledgeable about hunting, about firearms, and other things. And Lynn Thompson, if you're anybody in the knife world, you know Lynn. If you're outside the knife world, Lynn was the founder and the owner of Cold Steel Knives. All those knives are Lynn's designs. He's a design genius. He's probably been copied more than anybody I know. He's been copied more than me, and I've been copied a lot with our ammunition designs. Lynn just designed and made damn good stuff. But I don't even think we'll talk about knives today. Lynn is an extreme handgun hunter. He told me he likes handguns more than knives, which is saying a mouthful, because Lynn literally is the knife guru, probably of the free world. Lynn's a martial artist, an extreme martial artist, been at it his whole life. We may get into that topic as we go through this. But the thing that has always drawn me to Lynn has been his generosity. Lynn is underrated and underspoken when it comes. He's hunted all over Africa. He's got a full 2 years of combined hunting time in Africa. He's killed many world records or top 10 records with handguns in Africa and other places. So we're going to discuss a few contemporary things that will matter to our listeners and or viewers. And Lynn, you haven't said a word yet, and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here today on your first ever podcast.
Well, thank you. Is there anything in particular that you want to discuss about yourself or your accomplishments that I missed or glazed over?
Well, I would say that you talked about me liking guns, and I spent a lot of the money that I made at Cold Steel hunting around the world with handguns. And I started shooting a handgun when I was 13 years old, when I bought a Buffalo Scout 22 single action at Rayleigh's drugstore in Chico, California. And I shot the doors off that thing. And I remember I sold it to somebody else it was all beat up and rattling but it still worked. I sold it for $32 what I paid for it when I was a senior in high school to somebody else. So, I just love handguns and firearms in general. My wife calls me a gunaholic. I said to her one time, I could be a girlaholic. And she said, no, gunaholic was okay. So I'm Lynn, proudly saying I'm a gunaholic. And I'm a martial artist that owned a knife company for many, many years.
As long as you're not a recovering gunaholic.
No, I think it's a fatal disease.
Yeah, I know. I'm just as much of a gun crank myself. Only I'm more into rifles than you are. When you and I spoke last night, we talked quite a bit about some of the gun misinformation and some of the yahoos doing videos and other things on the internet. They just don't have any chops. They don't have any bona fides. They're not real. In your mind, if you're going to get on the internet and discuss guns, what bona fides matter the most?
Well, one, I think you have to be a tremendously good shot. in the beginning. I looked at a YouTube video last night at 12 yards. This guy shot a group like this with a 1911. And he says, not too bad. And then he goes on to tell us about the stopping power of a 1911 and stuff. Hey, if you shoot a group like this at 10 or 12 yards, I don't want to listen to anything you say. You're not an expert. You're a beginner. You're an amateur. Your opinion doesn't count. Keep your mouth shut until you are qualified to say something. Now that sounds like arrogance, and that's why some people don't get me and some people don't like me. It's not arrogance, it's experience. And I've been humbled a bunch of times in my life when I got up against people or was associated with people that are far more advanced than I was. And then all it did is inspire me to be like them. I remember when I went to Australia for the first time in 1990. I had just gotten married. It was our honeymoon. And I took my wife to the outback of Australia. And I mean the outback. And I got to hunt with a very famous professional hunter called Mick McCormick there. He was actually Professional Hunter of the Year one year for Safari Club magazine. And he and many other mentors taught me a heck of a lot about shooting. And the first thing he did is when I shot a rabbit, he yelled at me, "Mate, you don't shoot a rabbit in the body, you shoot him in the head. You can't sell a rabbit body shot." And yeah, he corrected me all the time and told me about a famous American hunter named Mr. Brown, who was the best shot he'd ever seen. And yeah, he schooled me so much about shooting and hunting. I owe a huge debt to Mick McCormick, and he was one of many mentors that have helped me grow as a hunter and as a shooter. But I think getting back to what you said, you need to have, like you said, chops. What are chops? Qualifications. The experience and the successes to talk about. For instance, I never taught knife fighting for money until I went and fought twice at Dog Brothers. And I was one of the oldest people ever to fight there. And since there's no winners or losers, I can't say that I won, but I'll just say I acquitted myself extremely well. We'll leave it at that. And there's no other person ever in the knife industry that owns a knife company that's ever fought in Dog Brothers. Most of my competitors think a knife is only useful for cutting your steak. That's it. That's about the end of their knife use goes. And that's why I kind of always reviled them. So get chops. When you're talking on YouTube, and I see someone that's 24 years old telling me about their vast hunting experience and what they know and how it's going to be, and I thought, maybe you started hunting when you were 12 and you have 12 years experience. But guys like you, Tim, that have been hunting their whole lives, you probably started hunting it before 12, knowing your background, and you're at least 60 years old now. So you've got like 48 years, and now you're just opening your mouth. And people still doubt you. So you've got massive chops to talk about hunting and guns and stuff like this. And yeah, when I did the Never an Arm DVD in 2009 or 10, I had a lot of people criticize me that were firearms instructors and all this stuff. Little did they know that they have no experience compared to me hunting and shooting. You know, I did a video that took us about 4 weeks to do entirely, and we expended tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition and all kinds of potentially dangerous situations. Not one malfunction, not one safety violation, not one negative discharge, nothing. And they're telling me that I was unsafe with a gun. They don't understand there's only 2 rules in a gunfight. 1, you don't shoot your friends. 2, you shoot the bad guy. There is no other rules. There's no safety rules. There's nothing.
Gunfights are pretty damn unsafe. So
Yes, they are. And you know, I went and tried one time. My friend Robert Vaughn said, "Lynn, why don't we go to this IRC International Revolver Championship match?" And I hadn't practiced for that match. He said, "Oh, it'll be fun. Just go, and you'll just have a good time." Well, I found that the rules were you have to put your hands up here before you draw, from here and this. And I found myself after that match doing this and then drawing my gun. I said, that'll get me killed in a gunfight. You know, you don't make any preliminary move as you go into your gun unless they're so close you have to go to a finger jab to knock them back enough to get your gun out. But yeah, getting back to chops, that's a pet peeve of mine, especially like in the knife and sword reviews, same thing.
How many animals do you think you've killed?
Well, this would be a very conservative estimate, about 50,000.
See, and if I count Tweety birds and lizards and stuff like that, I'm well into the thousands. But if I count just big game, domestic American game and African game and other North American game, at least 1,000, probably more like 1,500 to 2,000. But it takes those kinds of numbers, in my opinion, before you start to understand all the variables and how bullets really work, and how animals really die or don't, because I'm sure you've seen the same anomalies I've seen. You shoot them dead, and they run off. You track them for 1.5 miles and never find them. I mean, so
that's 100%.
Yeah, it takes a lot of actual in the field experience, and I suppose I shouldn't say it annoys me, because I don't want to sound like some short-tempered butthead, but it's very frustrating to get on the internet and have people that have never even shot. I mean, I've got all these people telling me how much better a 10mm, assuming the same ammo as the 45, the same class of ammo, how a 10mm kills bears better than a 45 ACP plus B. And I get told all the time, and they know it because their friends all talked about it on YouTube, and they did gelatin tests and it penetrated deeper. And I'm like, folks, until you've killed at least a few bears with your 10mm and with a 45, you're better off listening than you are talking. I mean, and I can't stress it enough. Real chops, real experience. And that was one of the reasons I wanted you to do this podcast with us, because you've got the real experience. You may have quite a bit more than me when you say 50,000, because if I add up all the Tweety birds and stuff like that I've shot.
Let me explain why I get to that number. And then
Sure.
people say, oh, Lynn, maybe he isn't full of shit. I've made maybe 10 or 12 trips to Australia, most of them 3 weeks or longer. In those trips, I've killed over 12,000 kangaroos. Now, these are kangaroos set for destruction as pests on sheep ranches.
Sure.
So it's culling. But I've got to shoot them out to 460 yards. You can see in one of my videos, I'm shooting running kangaroos at over 450 yards with a 223. And my friend Mick McCormick was doping the wind for me and telling me where to hold and how to be in front of them. That's how I hit them. I can't say that I hit them because I was that bitchin'. It was because he was that bitchin', and he's killed over 1 million rabbits. So these are the type of people that I was fortunate enough to get to work with. I've probably shot very close to 5,000 goats and probably 4,000 or 5,000 horses and donkeys combined. And this is all on control. But it's the reason I went there was to get that massive experience. Where are you going to get the experience of shooting that many animals and doing that much killing at a price that you could possibly afford? I couldn't do it in Africa. I could never afford to kill that many animals in Africa. But I did that to get the chops, the experience to speak. I looked forward into the future and said, someday I may want to talk about these things, and I need the backup. I need to know that I've done it. Like, I've shot 458 buffalo. And some people will call that a lie, and I warn you at your peril not to say that in print or libel me, because I took pictures of every one of those buffalo that I've shot, and I have the photos, and I have massive amount of video on it. And now, Granted, probably 425 of them were in Australia, but Australian buffalo, they kill people every year.
Yeah, yeah, they
And then
do. They're
getting
dangerous.
back to other things, like I've gone to Tasmania a few times and shot 700 possums, hares, and small kangaroos, and wallabies, they call them. I shot trespassing sheep. I've I've got to do a vast amount of shooting. In one day in Australia, I shot 800 rabbits in an hour. My wife, Mick McCormick, his wife Cheryl, were all loading for me, and I used his 10-22 with a Swarovski scope on it, and my Kimber 22. I had 4 10-round magazines for that, and he had 3 or 4 extended magazines for his Ruger 10-22, and I just fired away. It was the most fun I think I've ever had in my life. The rabbit cycle was way up, and rabbits are a pest there. They poison them like crazy, and it was an opportunity for me to get in a whole lot of practice on live animals, and the whole time he's saying, headshots only, mate. So, yeah.
So
How do
how?
you talking about the culling I've got to do in Africa? You know, I killed 156 wildebeest out of a helicopter one day, and I've killed probably 1,000 warthogs. It's I sat down and counted it up, and it you would yeah, that's why I want to be conservative. You would call me a liar if I told you what I've really done.
So I guess you have some idea of what kinds and types of bullets, not necessarily cartridges too, but what kind of bullets kill certain types of animals. I mean, you've gotten it the only way you can really get it as good, solid, reliable opinion and information.
Well, you remember the Barnes X bullet, Tim?
Yeah.
When that first came out, Jeff Steer, who was the associate editor of Guns and Ammo, a dear friend of mine, he was the best man at my wedding. He and I went to Africa together in 1990, and his wife Colleen. And we took the first, Randy Brooks sent us the first X bullets. They weren't even out yet. And he shot a buffalo with them. I shot a zebra with them. And Jeff was the one that got me into dissecting after I shoot. He always wanted to see what the bullet did. So I can't tell you how many hours I've spent with my arms like this up into the guts of some animal trying to pull out and find the bullet and have a look at it, see whether it expanded and how far it penetrated and on and on and on. I remember in Tanzania, I shot a buffalo at about 10 yards with a Brennicky slug out of a 12 gauge, and it hit him here in the chest, and we wanted to see how far, and we saw it way back, about 4 feet back, almost all the way out of the body. We finally found the bullet or the slug. So I've got to do a lot of dissection of bullets to see what works and what doesn't.
Is that one of the black magic Brennickys, the
I
three?
think it was before that. This was in 1999.
And it
So
still penetrated that deep.
yeah, just a regular Brennicky slug. But mind you, now it was 10 yards. I found that slugs at 40 yards don't do near as well on the penetration. I've killed I think 4 buffalo with slugs now. And there's a famous one that's on video. I shot this water buffalo. Matt Bando was filming for me. He's standing right next to me. I shot it twice with a 12 gauge at about 30 yards. And he ran off and he stood about 80 yards away. And I broke the gun open, but I didn't reload it. And I pulled out my 454, it's this one. Let's see. The Super Red Hawk right here. I pulled this out and I said, watch, I'm going to shoot him in the head. Now, holding this shotgun broken in my left hand, I cocked and I shot single action. And I said, watch this headshot. Boom, plop, dead on camera, over 80 yards away. But that comes from practice.
Lots of practice.
Lots and lots of practice.
When I was a kid, they had what they called an agricultural season for deer. And I lived in Northwest Oregon, so they were Columbian blacktails. But within a mile of farmland, you could shoot several deer. And I always did anyway, because my dad would buy a tag for me to fill. My mom would buy a tag for me to fill. And that was in the days when nobody cared. nowadays, if you fill somebody else's tag, hell's bells. It's a major offense. You get in all
Oh, a
kinds.
felony.
Yeah, and back then nobody cared. So I shot a lot of deer and I used shotgun slugs. And I had a guy, well, 2 or 3 guys, message me and say, that's bullshit that you shot a deer in the head with a shotgun slug at 100 yards. That's bullshit because at 100 yards, the bead covers their entire head. And I never responded, I never answered, and I just, do people know what a 6 o'clock hold is? I mean, I never cover the target with my bead or my sight. All my guns are sighted in at a certain range for a 6 o'clock hold so that I can see where the bullet hits.
Exactly, because you're an experienced hunter. They don't know that at 7 yards, your front sight covers up the entire kill zone. If you're not holding 6 o'clock, you can't tell for sure where the bullet's going to go.
No. So I sight, and I sight my dangerous game rifles, my 577 nitros and stuff that I use in Africa the same way. If I bring the gun to bear at more than 50 yards, the bullet is going to strike between 50 and 80 or 90 yards. The bullet will strike right at the top of the front bead. If it's a 5-yard shot, doesn't much matter. I mean, you don't need a 6 o'clock hold at 5 yards because your bead's not covering much of anything. But people, there's a systematic way to learn these things. I cared about hunting as a kid, and I was a 14-year-old kid using a J.C. Higgins bolt-action shotgun that my dad bought somewhere. The thing was more rust than it was bluing, and I would buy slugs, and then I would practice with slugs, and I would go out and hunt with slugs because that's what we were allowed to do there. And I had more than one state policeman check the tags, and in Oregon, state police is Fish and Game Enforcement. And I remember one time dragging 3 deer down this dirt road with my dad's tractor. I was probably 15 or something. And state trooper, which you never saw out in the country where we live, came down the road, pulls up, and he stops and he looks at the deer, and they were all tagged. They were all does because it was a farmland issue. Too much feeding on farm crops, and so you were allowed to shoot does or bucks. And he looks at them, he looks at the tags, and he goes, "Looks like you're having a good morning." And I said, "Yeah, isn't that cool? I got 3 this morning." And he goes, "Well, they're all tagged, so that's all I care about." And he drove off. Geez, I'd still be in jail if I did that today. I mean, they've just made our society, in my opinion, hasn't improved. Law enforcement has the discretion, but they don't have the brains. And so, if they can get you, they get you. So anyway, that's just one story from my childhood. I'm sure you've got a ton of those too. But on this internet issue, all these internet experts, I don't know how to get around this. We're doing YouTube, and we're just now starting podcasts. We're going to do Spotify. We're going to do X, Twitter, TikTok. We're going to be on all the forums. I've hired a company to manage all this for me. And we want to bring truth to hunting and shooting, and what ammo works good for what purposes. It's all about bullet design and impact velocities versus the size of the game you're shooting and the shots you're willing to take. And we want people to know this stuff because right now, and this is true, you can come out with a new bullet design and you can write a couple paragraphs and send that bullet design off to some gun writers and read their article 3 months or 6 months later or whatever, and they're going to kind of regurgitate what you told them. And they don't know, they're just regurgitating what you told them. And I see this all the time in the gun industry. For example, 15, 20 years ago, the 10mm fan hit. Well, if you're going to carry a semi-auto, for bear defense, as if all bears are the same. I mean, some full-grown bears only weigh 200 pounds. Others weigh over 1,200. So there's no such thing as bear defense. It's like calling all cars a Volkswagen. But we can't. We need to learn the difference in internet hype basically in the gun media. Well, the 10mm outpenetrates the 45, so it's the way to go. Okay, back to that premise. Not all 10mm ammo is the same. So which 10mm load are we talking about? Not all 45 ammo or 45 ACP plus P ammo is the same. So which loads are we discussing? Because I guarantee you 185 grain expanding hollow point 45 is not what you want to shoot bears with. People, fine. Bears, no. You need the deeper penetration of a non-expanding bullet at those low velocities to get into bear vitals and shoot them at any angle and still get into vitals. Bears aren't people.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right. You see, this is a CZ Dan Wesson PM7 45 1911. I've killed 3 deer and 3 wild boar with this. The longest shot in the deer was maybe 30 yards. I was using Black Hills plus P 230 grain XTP bullets. And they only went in about 10, 11 inches. I actually found the bullets, some of them. And they were beautifully expanded. But that isn't what you want to shoot a bear with.
No, a big bear.
It's a tickle.
A big bear especially is so much thicker and denser bodied than any of the deer species. Unless you're talking moose, which is a deer species, but they're 1,700 pounds in Alaska. No, these are a few of the things that we want to teach and share with people, which is in part why I called you and asked you to be a part of this podcast. There's so much, and don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking hypothetics. People need to have an engaged brain. They need to go through thought processes. It's part of the way we learn. But there's no substitute for actually shooting a boatload or 2 or 3 or 20 of real, live, big game. There's just no substitute for it. I watched Gelatin test
Shooting steel doesn't transfer. I
No.
see all these people shooting steel, and I wonder, and they're good at shooting steel, but there's a huge difference between taking life and shooting steel, and there's a huge difference when you're paying to take that life, $6,000, $8,000, $12,000, $15,000 you're betting on the shot.
And I'll add to that, there's a big difference, not just in the techniques and the technical aspects, but emotionally too, especially if we get into shooting people. Emotionally, there is a component that if you're not mentally prepared to deal with, can and will get you killed.
That's 100% true. God made us with a huge reservation against killing other human beings. It's built into our DNA. It's in our soul. We know it's wrong, and we have huge reservations about doing it. You have to be able to cross over to do that, and the only way you're going to learn to do that is by killing a lot. So I've seldom talked about this, but I'm a much better killer than I am a hunter. But in my profession, and the people that I've trained in the organizations I've trained and stuff, they've come to me because I have those unique skill sets. And they were bought at a high price. I paid a lot of money to learn how to do these things and to perform no matter what. And yeah, you're 100% right when you're saying that.
Well, so do me a favor, start your own YouTube channel and talk about these things, because okay, for example, gelatin testing. Okay, I can go on several YouTube channels and watch guys, and I'm not knocking these guys. By the way, some of them I think do an admirable job for the aspect of bullet performance that they're covering. But have you ever seen a wild animal made of gelatin?
No. In my opinion, gelatin is far, far more resistant to the bullet than actual flesh.
You know, gelatin doesn't have bones that are filled with moisture. You can't really duplicate the killing of a large animal unless you kill another large animal. Just the moisture content in bones isn't transferable to dead, dried out bones that you might throw in a block of gelatin. And, you know, gelatin's pretty consistent material. I've never seen an animal that was consistent. They've got voids in their body. They've got big bones in their body. They've got lung tissue, which is kind of soft and very wet, very filled with moisture. And then they've got muscle that is dense and filled with moisture. And anytime somebody told me one time, I said that I figured a Cape buffalo was 70% water. And somebody Googled it, and of course we all know Google's accurate. Somebody Googled it and got back to me and said, it said on this page I Googled that a Cape buffalo was 60% water. So whether it's 60 or 70 or whatever, you can't duplicate that any other way than by doing it to another animal. And even then, shot angles are different, body size is different, the temperament of the animal.
There you go. Now I was waiting for you to say that. Animals have souls, not like a human soul, but they all have souls and personalities and temperaments. Some of them are much tougher than others. The Maasai say there's a big difference in lions. Some lions, when they chase them off, the cow they just killed, they'll run for miles. They'll vomit up the meal they just ate, and they'll just run like scaredy cats. And others will run 100 yards and say, hell no, I'm not running. I just paid for that meal. You're not going to vomit it up. I'll kill you guys. And they fight back. So there's a big difference. Same thing in buffaloes. I've seen a huge difference in buffaloes when you shoot them. In Mozambique, in Gelatin 10, I was there, and Buck Medley was with me, and the PH, I forget what his name was, and I had a 500 nitro Heim. And I shot this buffalo at about 70 yards, spang on, perfect shoulder shot. I could see his whole body shudder, and he went over. Got up, bang, again, on the shoulder, knocked him down again, stood up, now I reloaded, bang, knocked him down, he finally died. And the PH said to me, that buffalo had his soul tightly nailed to his backbone. He was not going to give up. He said, if you hadn't had a 500 nitro, if you were shooting him with a 375, we'd be chasing that thing all day long.
Yeah, or he'd be chasing you.
Yeah, because he was just that tenacious of life. So you don't know. The bear that you shoot, he may be a badass or he may be a pussy. It depends. Did he learn to respond to danger by running or fighting? And every animal picks different ways.
So the point being that unless you shoot 1,000 animals, you really don't have a solid, you can't replicate a field shot exactly very often, if ever, because the angle the animal gives you is different, their breathing pattern is different. One thing that I learned from a neurosurgeon, and he learned it from an Indian guide in Montana. He said, you know how sometimes you'll shoot an elk through both lungs and it'll run 300 yards before it tips over. He said other times you'll shoot an elk through both lungs and it'll run 10 yards, tip over. He said it has to do with when they inhale. If you shoot them right at the end of their inhalation and they've just oxygenated their lungs and filled their blood, which keeps the brain alive with oxygen, and then you shoot them, they're fully oxygenated. They can run for quite a ways. But if you shoot them right at the end of the exhale and they're needing another breath, They don't go very far before the brain shuts down due to lack of oxygen. So there's a lot to be learned. And, even that thing that I just discussed about shooting him on the inhale versus the exhale, I didn't learn that till 4 years ago. And I know I have actually in Africa, because we do a lot of culling on our African ranch, I have actually tried to time the breathing and then lung shoot them to see what it'll do. But it's hard to time breathing on animals that are standing there staring at you, getting ready to run. So, you cannot duplicate a field shot very often, if ever. So the only way you can come to any certain knowledge is to lump together 1,000 kills, 2,000 kills, and all the combined experience with all the exceptional anomalies, and come to conclusions. And some guy pounding a keyboard ain't gonna get that done.
I had the same frustration in the knife and sword business. I don't know any of my contemporaries that have gone around the world and used swords and knives to kill as many animals as I have. And we've lost all of the vast knowledge that our predecessors had in the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th century on edge weapons. It wasn't really written down. And so I've had to relearn all the things that swords and knives can really do and what it takes. And that's why I'm not very well liked sometimes when I talk authoritatively. They think I'm bragging or whatever, and I'm really sharing my hard-won knowledge. And I can't even today go into the detail, even on your podcast, of what I've learned. But I didn't want to be a phony. I didn't want to be in the fighting knife business and not know how they worked and not be able to fight with one. So stabbing cardboard or stabbing plywood or a ballistic dummy, they all teach you something, but they're not the same as crunching through a rib cage. Until you've done that on something live, it's not the same as saying hit the rib and you pull out instantly and you raise or lower your impact point by a ½ inch and go again. And I've done it so many times, I even do it instinctively. If I hit that rib on a buffalo, I immediately go again. And I remember famously, a lot of people won't believe this, but Matt Graham of Hunt Australia, he's passed away sadly way before his time, but we had a freshly killed buffalo, and he didn't think that I could kill that buffalo with my Bowie knife. And I said, watch this. And I held it in a hammer grip like this, and I used a straight wrist stab like that, as hard as I could. And you could hear, it was a buffalo bull. A cow's ribs are thinner and more fragile than a big bull. And you could hear that point crunch through the rib as it buried itself. And then he said, wow, you could kill a buffalo with a Bowie knife. And then I pulled out a kukri and I did it the same way. And he said, look at the hole that thing made. It split the whole rib. Yeah, you can. But how are you going to know that unless you do it? Who has access to a buffalo that's just been killed not even 30 seconds ago and you're stabbing him? Who gets to do that?
Well, you've done it on quite a few that weren't dead yet, too.
Yeah, I have.
I mean, you just sneak up on them.
A knife. with great trepidation, I'll tell you.
So for people that don't know this about you, you have bigger balls than me, or maybe you're just not as smart as me. I don't know. But you sneak up on sleeping Cape buffalo and plunge a spear through him. And then you probably run like hell. But there is no way I am going to sneak. I mean, Cape buffalo, when they become enraged, are powerful enough. I mean, they can flip side by sides over so easy. They can stomp you into nothing. And I've watched them fight with their horns. They know exactly where the tip of that horn is going. They know exactly. I mean, if you were to take a little sticky paste on and put it on the butt of another bull, and two of them were fighting, and the other bull decided to make a hole right where that little stick-on pasty was. He can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're incredibly precise. So if I'm dumb enough to sneak up on a Cape buffalo and plunge a spear into it, you can damn well bet in a half a second I'm already 20 yards away going the other direction.
Well, the first Cape buffalo I killed with a spear was like you said. I snuck up on him in a really high wind. The two buffalo we'd seen gone into this real thick thicket, and we figured they were going to go in there, lay down, and get out of the wind. And we crept in on them. I had a cameraman. I won't say his last name. His first name was Johnny. He put his camera down, unbeknownst to me, and took up his rifle that was slung over his back. He was so shit scared. And I snuck up on him, and I got about 11 yards away, and I threw as hard as I could. And by the grace of God, I spined him. So he couldn't quite get up. He's trying to get up, and I grabbed my second spear. I didn't even know to have my pistol in my hand. Normally when I hunt a buffalo with a spear, I put my revolver in this hand. So after I throw, I just feed that in there and get ready to shoot again. I wasn't even smart enough to do that. That's how stupid I was then. And I threw the spear in. I got my next spear, and he's doing this, trying to get up. And I threw again with all my might and got it right through his heart, and I killed him outright with it. But when I threw the second spear, the PH had dropped his rifle and grabbed me by the belt and tried to pull me back. He's saying, "You're going to get killed." And I remember I was so adrenalized and I was so strong then. I towed him, weighed 190 pounds. I towed him all the way forward and threw that other spear again. And he's trying to pull me back the whole time. "You're going to get killed. You're going to get killed." But once you make that commitment, it's really hard to stop. And you know that. Once you commit to the fight or to the hunt, or you've got something wounded that's dangerous, you just can't walk away. Now you got to finish it. You're in it.
Well, if you do walk away, chances are you will get hurt. I mean, you're right.
Somebody else will, or you, or somebody else will.
Yeah, somebody will. You have to finish the fight. It's too dangerous, in my opinion, not to.
Yeah, you can't leave dangerous game wounded. You can do sometimes you get away no matter what. You've done your best effort, you can't find them, but you always know there's a possibility that thing will take out its ire, its spleen, if you will, on whatever human he sees next.
That's one of the issues I have with U.S. Fish and Wildlife doing special protected status on grizzly bears. Really? So most people want to be law-abiding. I want to be law-abiding, but the laws are so corrupt and so stupid, I often find myself breaking them. But now you've got an entire several generations, an entire class of grizzly bears in the lower 48 that have no fear of people. You can't hunt them, you can't shoot them in self-defense, or you'll spend $100,000 on attorney's fees. So what you've got is bears that now take liberty with humans. They're not afraid. They're not even cautious. And my mantra, if you want to call it that, with grizzly bears is, if I encounter one, which I do where I live, and they run from me, they're safe. But if they stand there and look at me and pop their teeth or woof at me, or start swaying their head back and forth, they're dead. And we have to protect human life above animal life. And there's this whole push in the whole tree hugger driven agenda of our federal government that animals are sacred and their lives matter more than humans. Wrong. I'm sorry. I've killed more than one grizzly in what I felt was self-defense in the lower 48 where they're protected because the bear wasn't afraid, the bear was acting aggressive, and if you wait for them to charge, now it's a very, very serious do or die, and you better do it right. You're going to get one chance at it, and you've got to brain them or hit them so hard in the body that it discombobulates them.
Well, you were telling me the other day just how fast, people don't understand how fast a grizzly bear can move and the momentum that starts right away. It's like faster than a quarter horse out of the gate. So,
Yep.
like you said, a quarter horse takes time to get a stride. He's a very fast accelerator, but a grizzly bear can accelerate faster than a quarter horse. And now he's coming over 30 miles an hour like a freight train, and you have a second and a half, 2.5 seconds max to make a brain shot. And that's a real gamble on your life. I mean, you're really spinning the wheel.
Yeah, you are. And I don't care how good you are, anything can go wrong. You can plant your back foot on a twig that rolls, and there goes your balance, hence your sight picture.
100%.
I mean, there are so many things that can go wrong, and I've always been lucky. My wife saw me make a brain shot on a charging bear 3 years ago, and I wasn't even hunting. Might have been 4 years ago. She was the one hunting, and this bear stood up and looked at us. And he's standing on his hind feet looking at us, and my rifle's leaning against a tree because I'm getting too lackadaisical. I've done this too much, and I'm not used to black bears charging. And I just looked over. He saw us. He knew we were there, and I looked over at him very quietly. Said, "Hit him right in the sternum." She was shooting a 300 H&H mag with 180 grain tip triple shock bullets, so plenty of cartridge for black bear. Well, she didn't hit him here like I told her. She was kind of wobbly, a little nervous, She hit him right over here. Well, it knocked him down for sure, but he got back up and located us, and then he did that split-second charge thing, and it was so fast. He started at 30 yards away. I reached forward, grabbed my rifle from the tree without looking down. If you look down at your gun, you're a dead man. You need to know where your controls are. You need to be intimately familiar where you could you need to be able to find everything blindfolded.
Intimately familiar is the key word there. Go on.
Yeah, and so I'm keeping my eye on the bear. I bring the gun up to my shoulder as I find the safety, and I just look down the side of the barrel. There's no time for a scope, and I pull the trigger and brained him. And this bear goes flipping and sliding to a stop, and she has since seen me do that on charging Cape buffalo too, at very close distance, maybe 5 feet. And it's if you panic, you die. So my motto has always been think and live or panic and die. That's just, and that's the same thing for any form of martial arts, which, by the way, shooting is a form of martial arts.
100%. It's what you're talking about is conditioned reflex. My teacher, Dan Inosanto, used to tell me, Lynn, if you do it enough, the muscles have brains of their own. So I have found in very panicked situations where I'm suddenly attacked like that, I've responded correctly, aggressively, and successfully, but not so much through conscious thought as through conditioned reflex.
Yep.
And being intimately familiar with your firearm. Afterwards, I wondered, how did I do that?
Yeah.
I was attacked by, I think I told you, a pack of wild dogs in Africa when I was buying knob carries. Not wild dogs, hunting dogs. And there was 25, 30 dogs in that pack. It was the whole village's hunting pack. And I successfully defended myself with a knob carry. But after it was over, a knob carry is like the Zulu War Club walking stick.
Yeah.
I wondered, how did I pull that off? And then I thought about it, and it was conditioned reflex. All the times that I've had someone drop and try to hit my knee or my leg with a sword or a stick or a knife, I pulled my leg back out of the way of that jaw and dropped on him with that knob carry on the top of his head without any conscious thought whatsoever. None. It just happened. And that's what's going to save your life, I think, a lot, is one, you have to be inside, you have to have a hardened spirit, and you also have to have those conditioned reflexes, which only come from practice. Tens and tens of thousands of repetitions, tunes all of your nerves and motor skills to work together with even your unconscious thought.
You didn't learn that on a keyboard?
No.
So I guess the reason we're sticking with this subject so long is that okay, maybe there would be no YouTube videos to watch then for people that like to shoot and hunt and stuff like that, because there are very few authoritative people making YouTube videos on that subject. And
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. I think that's a good point you made. We wouldn't have very much to watch if we just waited around for everyone to have 30 years of chops to say anything.
yeah, and I'm not belittling some of the content. Some of it I actually am belittling, but these gelatin testers and stuff. There's one guy called Tools and Targets. I like him. He does the same test every time with different ammo and different guns, but it's always gelatin testing, where he tests the penetration and he tests the bullet expansion and all this, and he always does that, but it has a place. 16 inches of penetration in gelatin on average might equate to 20 inches of penetration in a human or any living mammalian material. So, not knocking it, but I'm just putting it in its place. It has a place, but I don't know how valuable that place is in terms of a gunfight against a Cape buffalo or an elephant or a lion. I just don't think it's very applicable. That's all. I wanted to talk to you because you have hunted so much in Africa. I wanted to talk to you about corrupt African outfitters, and if you have a story or two with a motto, I'd like to hear them, because I know what the hell I want to say, but this podcast is more about you than me, and it's even more about the topics we're covering. And I think you've probably hunted with more African outfitters than I have. So, enlighten me.
I guess the thing I would say about African outfitters is whenever you're thinking about hunting with one, I would get a list of his clients to call and ask him some real questions. Because I think about 1 out of 3 are absolute frauds. And they are out for an easy way to make a buck. And because I have friends that speak Afrikaans, and I understand a tiny bit of Afrikaans, I was one time in a situation when the PHs were talking about how they were going to get a lot of money off these rich, stupid Americans.
Oh, yeah.
And I interrupted them and I said, wait. There are no rich, stupid Americans. You're not rich and stupid. You might be rich and ignorant. You might take advantage of the fact that they're ignorant about all your tricks and schemes, you skellums. But that doesn't mean they're not smart, and they soon will figure you out. And so...
That's my story.
Yeah. So I have lots of stories. For instance, I'm the first in the world to shoot the Danger 7 with a handgun with iron sights. But to shoot the leopard, it took me six hunts, 6 trips to Africa to shoot the leopard fair and square. And I didn't accomplish that whole thing. I started in 1990 and I didn't finish until 2002. And I was hunting leopards where there was only one leopard permit in that entire province that was still available. And there was probably 30 people that had been sold that leopard. I paid for pre-baiting, and we hired someone to go around and put up donkey carcasses and road kills and stuff to try to, attract and hold leopards, and found out there wasn't even any leopard left on that quota in that area. So, yeah, there is a tremendous amount of cheating in the professional hunting business. Now, unfortunately, I'm tarring the whole organization and all PHs almost with the same brush. So I want to say I think 2/3 are really on the up and up, and 1/3 aren't. And
That's bad odds.
yes, and you have to be very careful because everyone paints this glossy, beautiful picture when they're talking to you about the hunt or at safari club or whatever, and they tell you, oh, how many animals there are, the great abundance, and all this stuff. And then when you get there, I won't mention the name of the hunting outfit, but I actually invited friends on that hunt that I put my reputation up on, and we got there, and the animals were very scarce on the ground. When you walked out into the veld, when you would just see bones and bones and bones, look like a graveyard. And what they didn't say is the drought had killed off literally everything they had, and they were down just to shooting the last remnants. And that's not fair dinkum, as we say in Australia. That's not a fair play to tell us about this great experience you're going to have and this huge abundance. And also the hunt was a little cheaper than people I'd hunted with before. So that made it a little bit more attractive. And then we found out when we got there, and it was like, oh man, snookered again.
Well, it's very difficult, and they hit you also. I mean, one thing you said that's accurate, they view you as a rich target.
Amen.
And even the good outfitters that are honest, which I don't think is 2/3, I think it's more like 1/2. But even the really good outfitters that are honest still view you as a rich target. And they have ways of tricking you out of money. You know, let's say that you shoot several animals on your safari, and they say, well, I recommend taxidermist Smith or whoever. Let me take all your capes over to this taxidermist. They're very competitive price-wise. You know, it'll cost you a little bit less than it will in America, blah, 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 blah. And then what they don't tell you is that let's say you spend 50 grand doing that taxidermy, which it's not hard to spend 50 grand on taxidermy.
No, it's not. one life-size trophy is about $8,000 to $9,000.
Yeah, depending on the trophy, you know. And so what they didn't bother to tell you is that 25% of what you get charged. So let's say you spend 100 grand on taxidermy. 25% of that is a referral fee, or as they call it, a commission, that'll go straight back to the outfitter who referred you. And that's Africa-wide. That's the way it is all over Africa. Now, I don't have a problem with people making money. I just want them to be upfront about it. You know, if you're going to do that to me, tell me about it. And if I'm okay with it, fine. But to be sneaky the way they do, for example, Gracie Travel books a huge percentage of the flights in and out of Africa for safaris. You know, they're a good company. And
I use them too.
Travel pays a pretty high kickback to the outfitters that refer you or that you book, or if they book the flights for you. So if your flight's being booked for you, or if you've been referred by an outfitter, and like when my wife and I travel to Africa, we fly first class because we're so old and scarred up and beat up. If we sit in one of those scrunch seats for 2 days straight, we won't even be able to walk when we get off the plane. So we fly first class. Well, those tickets are expensive. You know, they're $10,000, $11,000 round trip per person.
Or
more.
Yeah.
So they were super cheap right after COVID, but
I'll tell you my hack for that, though. What I do is, it's a first class ticket. It's like $10,000 to $15,000 now. So what I do is I buy an extra seat. So let's say I'm going with my cameraman. I put him against the window. Then I have the middle seat is empty, and then I'm on the aisle. And because I'm not as tall as you, it works out, and I can have an extra $7,000 or $8,000 to buy animals with. That's my hack. But you're right. When you're flying for 16 hours plus all the stops and the connecting flights and the jet lag and stuff, it takes 2 or 3 days to recover, and you want to hit the ground running. I know, like when I travel for business meetings, I used to, when I was younger, fly economy, but now I always fly business because I have to hit the ground running. I can't be in a stupor for 2 days as I recover. I've got to sometimes get off the plane at 6 in the morning, and at 10 o'clock I'm in meetings.
Yeah.
So I get you. It's not a real extravagance if you're doing it like you, where it's part of your business. I mean, that's your business to test and shoot the things that you make. And you can't afford, your time's precious. You can't afford to miss 4 or 5 days of your life to jet lag.
So, but if you spend, just to use round numbers, if you spend 10 grand and you don't realize that you paid your outfitter, 2 grand of that went to him instead of savings in your pocket, I have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that if they tell you up front and you understand it and you agree, it's fine. But I have a serious problem with scamming people or taking advantage of unknowing clients. I mean, these are clients. They're placing their life in your hands. And not only are they placing their physical life in your hands, but their financial life, and your emotional life. When you go to a foreign country, especially Africa, with all the crap that goes on over there or can go on, you put a lot of trust in outfitters as you do your PH. And I would say that half of the PHs I've hunted with, I wouldn't trust my life to. So I don't trust my life to any of them. I know a couple really good ones, like Mark Sullivan. He's very good PH.
He's a badass too. I don't
Yeah,
care
he-
what says about him. All his detractors, you can say whatever you want, but he's a badass, dude.
Oh yeah, he is. He's the real deal. And
100%.
people criticize him just out of jealousy. They don't have anything to really criticize there. He's a type A personality. He's a strong personality. You almost have to get in his face to get him to get out of your face, because he's a control freak. He needs to be a control freak because he's dealing with life and death, and he's the expert and you're not the expert. So he needs to be somewhat of a control freak. I get it. But when I hunted with him, I had to back him down more than once. And I also, he didn't want me to get hurt. That's all. He's very conscientious. But I don't go there to be safe. If I was interested in being safe, I'd stay in bed at home.
Well, that's the difference between you and me and a lot of other people. I go to Africa to challenge my training here. So I train all year long, and then I go over there and I challenge my training to see if I can do what I practiced and to prove my practice and prove my method. And a lot of people don't do that. I'm learning something about myself. That's why I like to hunt dangerous game. You have to hold your mud and control yourself all the way through that experience. And not only is it dangerous, it's very costly to F it up. I mean, I remember a hippo hunt. I lost $6,000 because I wouldn't drop my brand new double rifle on a steel cage to shoot him with my pistol. I didn't want to wreck my gun to finish that hippo. And the PH couldn't even shoot. He couldn't even get a shot off. So I agree with everything you said.
Well, PHs, which are not necessarily outfitters. The outfitter books the hunt. The PH is the person that takes you hunting. They can be one and the same. A lot of those guys make very little money. They have substandard equipment, substandard firearms, and frankly, substandard qualifications in general. And so when people get ready to go to Africa, and if I was younger, I think I'd start an academy for training for African dangerous game. I would have a ball doing
Well,
that.
there's a couple people that do that. I know Gunsight had a dangerous game class, and I saw on YouTube today some other guy. I think he's in the Northwest. He has a grizzly bear, and he's got a charging target, and all that was pretty cool. So there are some people there, but then I was at Safari Club when you said that. It's interesting you say that. There was a guy who was selling that academy out of Texas. And he was in front of me in line talking about how people were challenging his chops and stuff. And I overheard him. I'm in line at the buffet, believe it or not, at the hotel. And you look at me. Of course, I was in the line at the buffet. And I said to him, I said, have you ever shot any dangerous game? You have a whole class on shooting dangerous game. Have you shot the Big Five? Have you shot the Danger Seven? How many elephants have you shot? How many lions have you shot? How many buffalo have you shot? We hadn't shot anything. But he was wondering why people weren't accepting him at Safari Club as being an expert. Well, because he wasn't. And I'll tell you how to test your pH to see if you can trust him on a dangerous game hunt. Have a shooting contest, dude. I've done it a number of times. I'll set up a 2-liter bottle at 50 yards, and I'll shoot with my 454, and I'll hit it within 2 shots. You got to shoot a 375 or bigger, and you have to hit it within 2 shots. I'm telling you, most guys can't.
No.
And then if they can't hit a 2-liter bottle at 50 yards, I'm out. See ya.
That's one of the things I love about our ranch manager over there in the Eastern Cape, whom you will meet. His name is Chris Yonker. Not only is he a PH in several provinces and several countries, but he's an outfitter, and he's young. He's 26, 27. He's young, but he has brass balls. You know, I don't know if he saved my life, but he definitely saved me from a good stomping. My third Cape Buffalo was the first charge I ever experienced. You know, and I'd had Cape Buffalo snort and shake their heads at me and stuff prior to this, but I'd never had one charge. And I won't tell the whole story here, but when he charged, he started at about 30 meters, and I was hunting. I was using a 375 H&H, and I was hunting this bull. And he got sick of us tracking him. We had tracked him quite a ways and blown him out 2 or 3 times, and he just got sick of it. And we saw him at the same time he saw us, and he dropped his head and started the charge before I ever fired. My first shot hit him in the spine. I was shooting down. Took out 2 vertebrae, but it missed the spinal cord. I was left to center by about 2 or 3 inches.
You took the flanges off.
Yeah, but you know, the only thing that counts with that kind of shot is the cord, and I missed the cord. And he didn't stumble or anything. I knew I hit him. He kept coming. My second shot hit him in his left eye, square in the center of the eye with that 375. He didn't flinch, he didn't blink, he didn't stumble. And I was thinking somehow maybe I was missing him, you know. And so I'm chambering another round, and I remember saying to myself, okay, it looks like I'm going to take a beating on this. I'm going to make sure I kill this asshole. So I shot him frontal at about 7 or 8 yards because he was closing the distance very quickly. I shot him in the heart. And knowing that that's a big target, their head bobs up and down when they're charging, and the brain's a lot harder to hit than the heart. You know, it's moving up and down at a rapid rate. And so I just remember thinking, and it's funny how when you're, you know, in a life or death situation, how you can think so many things at one time. It's almost as if some kind of a portal into another realm opens up, and your mind slows down, and you think all these things, and you know. Anyway, I hit him in the heart, and I remember thinking, I don't have time to work the action again. I'm going to try, but he's going to hit me before I, you know, get a shell chambered. But I'm still going to try. And I remember thinking, you know, oh well, it's going to end however it ends. I know he's dead because I knew the third shot hit him in the heart. And Chris, who was with me, and he was using my 458. He borrowed my 458 that morning, and we went over the sights and the controls on the rifle. It was a 364 Winchester, and there was a big bush between the buffalo and Chris, so Chris couldn't get any shots. and I was standing in the way. He needed to step over where I was to see the buffalo. And so what he finally did was he just shoved the muzzle between the bush and my head and aimed and pulled the trigger. Well, of course, I mean, I still have hearing loss from that. Hey, I'm upright, you know. I mean, he dumped that buffalo right in front of me. And then we were sitting there backslapping and kind of chuckling, you know, because the adrenaline rush now makes itself known. And so you're acting a little giddy or whatever, and that buffalo started standing back up, you know, and so Chris just walked up to it with the 458, put the muzzle against the spine and pulled the trigger a final time. But there are kids like that, and it's something that's in their DNA. You can trust them, you know. I don't trust very many people. I'm sure you don't. We've lived too long. We've seen too much human bullshit. I mean, we've just seen it from every angle, from people we trusted, people we loved. I mean, you know, we've seen a ton of that, so it's really hard to trust. But I'll tell you this much, you could trust Chris Yonker with your life in a charge. No question. You know, I've been there and seen him kill several buffalo. He's hunted several with me, hunted lion with me, done a lot of stuff with me. In fact, we're going elephant hunting in a month up in Botswana together, and he's going to act as my PH. But there are a few you can trust. Most
100%. I can think of like Dries Vizier. I've hunted with him a lot, and he can shoot under pressure. We had a shooting contest, and we were using my 500 nitro and 44 magnums. He came in second. I came in first. How about that? And I've seen him shoot buffalo under adverse situations. And yeah, he can hold his mud and shoot well. Guy Rose, another one that I've hunted with that I would trust with my life. Peter Channing, he's another PH in Natal that I would trust. So there's a lot of really good, tough PHs. Johnny Vivier, I would trust him. There's a lot of good ones. Mark, like you said, Mark Sullivan. But then there's other ones that I know that got their dangerous game license, and they lied, and they'd gone on photographic safaris on these dangerous game things, viewings and stuff, and they turned that in as if they'd been hunting them. And they were taking photos and not shooting them. So to get your dangerous game license, you have to have hunted under the supervision of somebody else all these animals. Well, they just lied and got the license anyway. So now you're hunting with a PH, and this I don't want to say their name. I know it exactly to be true. You're hunting with a PH that's never killed a buffalo, an elephant, a lion, none of the dangerous seven ever, and he's qualified to guide on big game hunts like that, dangerous game hunts, because he's taking pictures from 50 yards away with a camera.
it gets worse.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Africa, the governance is so screwed up over there, they can't keep their own records straight about anything. And so you could probably just photocopy somebody else's PH license and white out their name and write your name on there, and then take another photocopy of it and have a PH license. So,
well, I was on a dangerous game hunt. I'd wounded, this was in 1999 in Tanzania, and my PH said to me, after we knew the leopard was wounded and we were doing the follow-up, the PH said to me, "Lynn, you're the best shot here." There's two PHs and the trackers. He says, "It's up to you to stop this leopard." Now, all I had was a 454 Freedom Arm single action. And they were still thinking I was the better shot than they were with their rifles. And I probably was. Fortunately, we found it dead. But it was very, very hairy follow-up because, you know, we found the blood. We found where he threw up his meal. He could be ambushing us anywhere. I mean, it took us like an hour and a half to go like 70 yards or 80 yards, you know, because we had to look at every single speck of cover as we made that follow-up. But yeah, they said, it's up to you. It's twice now I've had PHs say, well, it's up to you to stop this thing. It's a wounded this. Like, again, on a wounded leopard thing in the dark. They said to me, another PH said to me, "It's up to you, Lynn." He said, "If that thing comes, it's going to hit us. It's going to be too close. It's too dark." He said, "It's up to you." And I had a double action. I had this double action. No, this one. I had this double action Super Red Hawk and 454 in my right hand, and a Laredo Bowie in my left. And I remember my cameraman saying his teeth were chattering in fear. And he's a pretty brave guy. And his name was Mark. I won't say his last name. He said, "Do I have to go?" And I said, "Mark," I said, this might be a fight for your life, and you're not a trained fighter." I said, "No." I said, "I'm shit scared, and I know what I'm getting into. And I have a lot of training in this. And I have an idea what to do. But no, we're not filming this." And that's another thing. Is like everybody wants you to get all your adventures on film. You can't get them all on film. Sometimes it's just too dangerous. You can't even have a cameraman with you because they make too much noise. And they're quite often not as good a hunter as you are. And your cameraman really needs to be a better hunter than you are if he's going to get everything. So whenever someone challenges you on what you said, "Did you get it on film?" they turn around and walk away like you're a liar because you didn't have it on film. Yeah, it's impossible to get everything on film, although I try.
Again, that shows their lack of hunting experience. I mean, it's impossible to get it all on film, or to get it on film. I mean, remember, the cameraman's angle is always different than your shooting angle. The cameraman's not seeing what you're seeing. He doesn't want to interfere with your shooting. He doesn't want to spook your animal. So it's very difficult to get quality film that shows everything you want shown when you're killing an animal. I mean, it works out a lot of times, but it's hard to do.
Especially spear hunting, because when you're hunting a kudu with ears like this, these giant bat ear antennas up there, and this awesome eyesight, they can hear and see anything. And if your cameraman makes the slightest wrong move, you're not getting jack. Normally, I always have to position them way far away and have them zoom and stuff, because the silence that you have to exert is not something that people can get unless they really practice it.
Yeah.
You have to be silent. You know that.
Yeah, I know some really good cameramen that are, and to be a good cameraman, you have to be a good hunter.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's
100%.
just what some of those firearms, I know that people that listen to this and don't view it won't be able to see them. Do you have anything there you want to show? You got some interesting looking handguns there.
Yeah, I would like to talk about that, because people always ask me, what is my key to success in handgun hunting? And I'll tell you, it's understudies. So I'll hold it up for the camera, you can see. For double action revolvers, I start with this 10-shot, 6-inch Smith & Wesson 22. I cut the lug off the front of it. I had my gunsmith bent fork and take that off because I wanted it a little lighter. And if you're not shooting a 22 double action a lot, you're not ever going to be a really good double action revolver shooter, in my opinion. Very few of us can afford to shoot centerfire ammo. Even if you reload, you can't shoot enough to be really, really awesome. I think one of the keys is a 22. So I start out with a 22. I have two that I shoot every week. This is another 8 3/8 inch K22 masterpiece that I had bent fork and put in a stainless steel 10-shot cylinder. What a great conversion that is, dude. I had 3 of them done. I'm having all of my 22s that are 6-shot converted to 10 shots. And he did just a marvelous job on this thing. It's just a delight. So this is an understudy for my 8 3/8 inch 44 Magnum. So then I go up and I shoot, again, this is an L frame, 7-shot, Smith & Wesson. I cut the lug off it so it looks like an old Model 19. You see the resemblance there?
Mm-hmm.
And I shoot this after I shoot the 22s because I can't afford, well, I guess I could afford it. I'm not willing to spend the money at between $35 and $60 a box to shoot 200 rounds of 44 Magnum every week. So I'll shoot usually about 100 rounds of 327 out of this. And then I move up to my 44 Magnums, Since I've been spear hunting, I mostly use double action big bore revolvers instead of single actions. So I shoot this one, and then I shoot even more this one. Usually around 50 rounds every week goes through this gun. And I shoot it primarily at 50 to 60 yards, sometimes out to 80 yards. And this is the one I hunt with a lot spear hunting.
That's a Smith & Wesson, is it not? Is that last one you held up, is that a Smith & Wesson?
It is. This is they discontinued this, but I was smart enough to buy 3 of them, maybe 4. And when I find something like you, Tim, like you mentioned in one of your talks on TV, you said when you find something that you like, you buy a bunch of them. I do the same thing. I bought 3 of these. I wish I had bought 6 because I know they're going to wear out. Now, this revolver was pretty unusable when I first got it. I shot potentially the world's largest grizzly bear in Copper Center, Alaska, in 1999. And when I was firing with this gun, I'll just show the camera. It's empty. You can see that, right? From that, you can see it.
We're not worried about it here. I figure.
Well, I know, but for all the safety please out there. So I'm firing, and I go, bang, double lung the grizzly. Pow, I can see the impact. I said, he's dead. He's running now. Click, bang, bang. I hit him 3 times, but the second shot, double action, the cylinder started to advance, retarded, and the hammer landed where I just shot.
Yep.
So I've experienced that in Rugers and in Smith & Wessons before, and I hate it.
Me too.
Because that'll get you killed. And I talked to Smith & Wesson about it with not much success. So I sent this gun to Ben Forkin, and he's come up with some good solutions for it. It hasn't reoccurred. So he's got it down pat. He replaces some springs and stuff like that. But it cost me about $800 to make this revolver good enough for me, for my ability. And that's what I want to talk about. You know, you were talking about in some of your talks about how Smith & Wesson, the other American manufacturers, are letting their quality go. Well, that's true. But I'll tell you what, this is a good place to start. Even for $1,000 or $1,200, I'm really glad this is available to me. Because if it wasn't, I would have to get by with something a lot inferior. So just know that when you buy a Smith & Wesson or a Ruger or a Colt, that you better be ready to put $400 or $500, $600 of gunsmithing in it to get it to be an awesome revolver. You know, the cylinder gap. I mean, sometimes the cylinder gaps on these Smith & Wessons are between 9 and 12 thousandths, and I want mine set at 4 thousandths. I don't want all that gas blowing out the side. And so those are some of my hunting guns. You know, so I shoot the 22s, the 357s, the 44 Magnums, and then the 454s. The 454, though, I might only shoot it 20 rounds a week to keep my hand in. And that's, for me, a very affordable way to practice. Getting back to gunsmithing, this is a Colt 1911 stainless steel that was made and perfected by me by 2 gunsmiths, Rich Wyatt from Gunsmoke, who's now out of the business and had some severe legal difficulties, and the late Keith DeHart worked on this. So I've got maybe $1,000, $1,200 worth of gunsmithing or more in this 1911. But I call this one of my killer dillers. This is an absolutely reliable, awesome 1911. I've got the small bead XS front sight on it and the XS rear sight, and it's all set up for close quarters or close encounters. Now, when we go over to single actions, I primarily have always hunted with Freedom Arms. I've got 2 of these, 252s, I think they're called. It's the heavy frame, and it's a 5-shot. You get a 22 Magnum cylinder with it. I've been using these. I took a set to Africa in '92 and shot a whole bunch of cool stuff with the 22 Magnum out of this. And this is an every week understudy. I shoot this at least 50 times. And then I go up to my 357 and I shoot this about 50 times. And then I go up my 44 Magnum and I probably run about a half a box through this, 25 rounds. And then I go up to my 454 and I shoot about 20 rounds. But the key is shooting the 22s. The double action 22s, I was just at the range on Wednesday and I fired, what was it, this one? I fired over 350 rounds to this revolver alone that day in my practice. So if you want to be a great handgun hunter or even a great gunfighter with a handgun, you've got to start with 22s. Like I have 4 Kimber 1911 22s. They discontinued them. I bought all they had. I wore one out and they said, "You're the only one that's ever worn one of these things out, Lynn." And I sent it back to repair and they said, "Nah, it's pretty worn. We'll just give you another one." So when I got that one, I thought, I better buy more of these. And fortunately, my gun store had 2 or 3 of them in stock and I took them all. So I think I have 4 22s now. And I kind of been saving them and I thought to myself, what am I saving them for? I'm no spring chicken. I better use those things up. I don't want to die and have 3 brand new 1911 22s in the safe. So I started shooting those a lot. So those are some of my keys to being a great handgun hunter. Is you have to shoot your understudies a lot. You're not going to shoot. Well, maybe when I was younger, I shot a big amount of 454s at a row. I was at the Shooters Holiday, and the late Wayne Baker that owned Freedom Arms then, he was watching me shoot this 454, and I was shooting the pigs at about 60 yards at the range there at the Whittington Center in Raton, New Mexico. And I was breaking these pigs, and I shot maybe 100 rounds in a row through this 454. And I didn't know he was watching me, and he came up to me and says, Lynn, I finally believe you. My whole life I thought you were full of shit. And then I just saw you fire 100 rounds of full house 454s. You did awesome. And he said, now I believe what you say. That was Wayne. He didn't believe anybody but himself.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, he believed himself when he shouldn't have.
but these things are going to mess with your hands. I always suggest that you wear shooting gloves, okay? And you don't have to shoot these things endlessly. Madeline Kay, who is a very noted woman handgun hunter and very famous in Safari Club. I admire her a lot. She's done a lot of my jewelry. She did this. She's done 3 bolo ties for me. She's really a great gal. And she hunts with a 454. And she was watching me on video saying, I can't believe you shoot that much. She said, I go to the range and I fire 10 shots. And that's it. So, but she said they're well-aimed shots. I'm taking my time and I'm really concentrating on my marksmanship. So you don't have to shoot 100 rounds in a row to be a successful handgun hunter. But you do have to, I think, you're really well advised to shoot the understudies. Now, yeah, it's a big investment. I know, not everybody can afford it. And that's the other thing we're talking about, is I've gotten this experience that I talk about because I own Cold Steel. God blessed me enough to be financially successful, and I was able to spend this money to learn about the things I was passionate about. And a lot of people don't have that opportunity.
No.
So, all I can say is this is America. If I can make it, anybody can make it. If you have your health here and you want it bad enough, you can. I mean, I started life in 3rd grade with $5 my parents gave me to start my savings account with. And that's it. And I put myself through private schools. And when I graduated, I didn't owe anybody anything. But I have to say, God helped me a lot. And I worked my ass off to do it. And I couldn't get as good at grades as some of my friends. My sister-in-law graduated with great honors. And I was a better student than her, and it kind of hurt to see her get those awards, but when she graduated, she had a whole bunch of loans, and I had nothing. I mean, I had no loans. I had no debt. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, you might not be able to afford it, but this is America. You can change your financial picture if you want to a lot enough.
And in the meantime, if you're going to listen to YouTube videos, keep in mind that only people that have done a lot of this really understand much about it. Everything else is conjecture, and that is something. When we do our next podcast together, you are a rags to riches story, and
100%. I didn't
yeah,
learn to speak English in this country. So I was born in Brazil. I came here with broken English. I had to learn how to speak English. So I have no sympathy for people that want to stay in our country that don't want to learn our language. Because I had to learn, and I paid a price at an early age. I mean, one of the reasons I got so interested in fighting at an early age is because I got picked on a lot. Because one, I wasn't skinny, and two, I didn't speak English very good.
I get it. And that is one topic I want to go over with you when we talk again. And keep in mind, I really want to dive kind of deeply into what's happening to our iconic firearms industry in America. You touched on it. You said, some of those guns, you've got to spend more than the gun originally cost to bring it up to snuff, to make it a very good, usable gun. And I'm of the belief, I was buying Smith & Wessons back in the 1970s that were very good guns. But now when I buy a new Smith & Wesson, and I'm not just picking on Smith & Wesson, I'll say the truth about all the major iconic American companies, Colt, Ruger. I have bought multiple firearms from all three of those companies that weren't functional. I mean, the sights won't adjust, the trigger return springs won't return the trigger, so many reamer chatter marks in the chambers that they won't eject empties. The empties cases stick in the chambers. I mean,
It's working on a 44 Magnum for me right now. The barrel is actually turned in crooked. It's brand new out of the box.
and it's a Smith & Wesson.
Smith & Wesson.
Yeah, I know. I've experienced all those things, and I don't really want to pull punches and be polite to the gun manufacturing companies, because it's only if they get heat or light. Truth is light, and if we shine a light on them and show the truth, they're more than capable of doing good quality control, because their designs are excellent. I mean, some of the Smith & Wesson and Colt designs, Ruger designs, are excellent designs.
I love this revolver. I just love this revolver.
Well, when they can't execute their design in a mass production scenario, it's actually disrespectful to the customer. And I feel hugely disrespected by all three of these manufacturers. I buy every month, I probably average 6, 7, 8 new guns a month. And
That's a lot.
yeah, it's the business I'm in. I have to test.
Part of your business, absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel disrespected because and imagine this happening to a newbie, not somebody with experience like me, but a newbie. You buy a gun to use it. You get it, it doesn't work, and it's got problems. Well, a newbie might even just give up on the sport altogether and just say, this is bullshit, I can't get this gun to work. And they don't really know what's wrong with it or how to fix it. At least I can diagnose, and if I have to, I can fix it. But I don't want to go out and spend $1,100 or $1,200 for a gun that I got to use and end up with a project on my hand. Because even if I take the time to box it back up and ship it back to Smith & Wesson, if they fix it, which times they don't, if they fix it and ship it back to me, I've still spent more money in precious time than I did at the cost of the gun. So for me, it's a lose-lose. And these American iconic gun makers should not treat their customers this way. They should have respect for the time and energy of their customers. And so when we get the chance,
Tim, do you think they can't make a better gun for the money, and they're afraid that if they make it right, they'll have to charge too much? Because I would rather pay $1,600 for this from the Performance Center and have it work perfectly out of the box than to have to send it to the gunsmith and lose half a year waiting for it to come back and then spend the money. So you think they're trying to hit a price point and they can't put enough time and money into it for that price point, or are they trying to make too much money on the gun?
no, okay, so this is a multifaceted problem. We may as well discuss it on this podcast, because part of the problem is you've got the consumer, and you and I both know that, I mean, this is like a duh statement. Money matters. Money is a finite thing that almost all of us have a finite supply of. But when you buy a handgun, depending on its purpose that you have for that gun, there might be 10 criteria you're looking to fill. You know, you might want a certain kind of double action, a certain kind of distance between your palm and your trigger finger. You might want a certain kind of sight, certain kind of cartridge, certain, you know what I'm saying. There's criteria that you're looking to fill. And if your number one criteria is the price, okay, you're part of the problem. Because now Smith & Wesson or Colt or Ruger, whomever it may be, is trying to make a gun that you won't turn your nose up at just because of the retail price. And so they start cutting corners. I mean, I've got a YouTube video where I just rant and rave about how ticked off I am at Smith & Wesson. I bought one of their end-frame 3-inch 44 mags. Balance is nice. The whole idea is a good idea. The whole design is a good design. But they put such a short front sight on it that even if I adjust the rear sight all the way down to its bottom setting, the gun still shoots way too high, because the front sight is a good 250 thousandths of an inch shorter than it ought to be for that barrel length. And that's not the only problem. The other problem.
Did go and shoot that gun? Did no one go and shoot that gun at 10 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards and see if they could hit anything with it?
No, they didn't. That's the answer. And you've got accountants running these companies. So what they do, because the other problem with that gun was the rear sight wouldn't adjust left to right, windage. It just wouldn't adjust. Vertically, it would adjust up and down, but not left to right. And so here I am paying $1,000 to get this gun, and I just go into a gun shop down here and ask the owner to order me stuff. I don't have time, to get on the internet, search around, haggle over price. I just buy them because I need them. They're work for me. And I ran and raved about this gun, not in a good way, because if I was a new shooter, I'd have given up on shooting right there and then. I adjust the rear sight all the way down, and at 15 yards, it's shooting 10 inches high with any load I tried. Never mind, the barrel cylinder gap is on the outside of what is acceptable. The front sight is too short, or too low, however you want to term it. If I'm a new shooter, I'm done. I'm all done. That's a bad experience. I don't know what's wrong, but everything's wrong. The gun doesn't work right. So I really want to hammer on our American iconic gun makers to pull their head out of their ass and start doing things with respect to the customer. And if you do that, you'll get return customers. I'm afraid to buy any new Smith & Wesson revolver. Don't seem to have the problems with their semi-autos I'm experiencing with their revolvers. For example, I have a friend who has an older, one of those same 3-inch model, 629 built on the end frame, and he's had his for 4 or 5 years when they first came out with that barrel length and that configuration of model 29, which I really, really like. His is perfect. I just paid him a boatload of money, even though I already have one. Mine doesn't work. And I'm not going to box it back up and ship it back to Smith & Wesson, because I've done that more than once where they've returned the gun having not done anything to it.
Send it to Ben Forkin, he'll fix it up for you.
Well, Ben Forkin is gifted. And even to send it to Ben Forkin, I've still got to package up a new gun.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, and I've still got to spend time.
You gotta wait 6 months to get it back too, if you're lucky. You're out the gun for 6 months.
Yeah. So I have a friend that had one. I said, "Hey, are you shooting that little 3-inch 629 at all?" He goes, "Haven't shot it in years." And I said, "Would you let me buy it from you? Because I need one for my testing. And the one I have, straight from Smith & Wesson, is a piece of crap." And so he sold it to me. So now I've got two, one that works and one that doesn't. And the one that doesn't, I'm not going to spend the time or the money to send it places when it should have been a good usable revolver when I bought it. And shame on Smith & Wesson, shame on Colt, shame on Ruger. I've had multiples of these happen. Now I get good guns from them too, don't get me wrong. I get perfectly usable, workable guns that I paid for. But in the 70s, when I bought a Smith & Wesson, there was no such thing as one that didn't work. They worked. So
this is a Ruger Super Red Hawk 44 Magnum that Keith DeHart did the action work and stuff on it, narrowed the trigger, rounded over a little bit. But this is an awesome 44 Magnum from Ruger. Just awesome. And you can shoot this thing to Kingdom Come, and I think it'll last. But you have to put the money in.
Yeah.
It's not going to be straight out of the box.
How was it out of the box?
To tell you the truth, I bought that used. So
how was it used?
Somebody that had hardly ever fired it, and probably shot it and said it was too much for him. So.
Well, anyway, I'm just kind of on a crusade to help America here, and if our iconic gun makers don't have the integrity, don't have the sincerity to do it right. I mean, I bought a Colt Anaconda last month, a 4-inch. I wanted it for testing. Same thing. Front sight is so low that if I adjust the rear sight all the way down, at 15 yards, I'm shooting many inches high with every load. And the trigger return spring doesn't work. So you've actually got to reset the trigger, pull the trigger, reset it with your trigger finger, and then fire it. Yeah, and I bought a couple of Rugers recently. I bought a little Ruger 22. Can't think of the model number. They're those. It's like they called them a 2245, but then they came out with a bunch of lightweight versions. For the same reason you shoot 22s. You get more practice and training shooting 22s. I mean, it's just a wonderful way to go. And we're standing on the banks of the Salmon River, 30 miles down from where the wilderness area starts. We took a raft trip. Takes 5-6 days to come out the other side of Idaho if you do that. She's standing on the bank of the river, and Kim can shoot pretty good for a person that didn't grow up doing it. And she's missing by a mile with this thing. So I'm like, let me see that. And I start shooting it, and I see something fall off the pistol. I look down in the sand, and there's the rear sight. And the rear sight had come loose in the dovetail and was drifting over and over and over till it fell out. And that's bullshit. And the other part of that story is I had already sent it back to Ruger twice to get them to put in a rear sight that would adjust, because the first two rear sights wouldn't adjust. So
I think a lot of people are struggling with these guns that don't work well. I know my younger brother was a pretty famous sheriff's deputy and won the annual shooting matches quite a few times. And he started shooting with me about 8 years ago. And after he fired some of my revolvers and pistols, he said to me, "Lynn, I didn't know guns could be this good." He said, "It's like cheating." So you can make them really good, but he was competing with stock issued guns. He had no idea, because he's not near as much as a gun guy as me, that you have to put all this money into the gunsmithing to make them shoot to your level.
Well, Lynn, the design on most of the Ruger designs, most of the Colt designs, most of the Smith and Wesson designs, the design is nearly flawless.
Like you said, yeah. Once you get them up and running, they're just bitching. They're just unbelievably good.
The problem is they're cheaping out on every consumer by putting a set of $5 sights on the gun, when they could put a set of $30 sights on the gun, and you'd have sights that properly click adjust and hold a zero. And they could actually test fire some of these and find out if the front sight's too low or not. That should be a known anyway with each barrel length, how much you need elevation wise to be sighted on in the middle of your vertical adjustment with your rear sight. They should come sighted about middle, so as you change loads, you can go up and down or left and right. And I don't think the people that run these companies even know what a gun is. I really don't. I think they're just making a product. They might as well be making brooms or toothbrushes or...
That's what I said about my competitors a long time ago. They just make widgets.
Yeah.
They have no use for a knife except to cut their steak with. They're like you and I. We spend our weekends shooting or hunting or in the outdoors. I spend a lot of my free time training. They go play golf and eat sushi. You know what I mean? They're not into it. You got to be into it.
Yeah, you do. And I'm convinced every design engineer should be forced to be an end user and a heavy duty end user. I'm not faulting the designs. The designs are pretty good. It's the execution thereof, because they've got accountants cheaping out. We can make X number of dollars more per unit of widgets if we make this part as cheap as possible or that part as cheap as possible. Well, I'm fine with that as long as it still works. but it can't be so cheap it doesn't work.
I agree with you. This is what I always said about my knives. I try to make knives to the highest standard. You know what the highest standard is? You can bet your life on it. You can literally bet your life that knife won't fail if you were actually forced to defend yourself against man or beast with it. That's the highest standard. And it's the same thing when you're selling a revolver or a pistol in a self-defense caliber. You have to imagine they might use that to defend themselves with. And it has to work. It can't come shooting 12 inches high. I mean, under the stress of combat, you got to say, I got to aim at his crotch to hit him in the chest.
Yeah.
That'd not work.
Yeah, that's
way well.
I did a little video shooting that little 3-inch Smith & Wesson. I was shooting a heart-shaped gong that's about 12 inches tall. And to hit the gong at all, I was aiming 2 inches below it with every shot at 20 yards. That's pretty pathetic.
Ben's got a new Smith & Wesson 22 Magnum, one of those air weights, weighs about 11 ounces. It shoots 4 inches to the right at 8 yards. And he didn't believe me. We had to shoot us all day. And so I put it on paper, and I shot it, and it went to the right. And then he was going to prove me wrong. And he took careful aim. And we're only shooting 5-6 yards away. And he says, by golly, it does shoot to the right. Because he was over here to the right too, 3-4 inches, just like me. So he's trying to fix it now, because in self-defense, I can't say to myself, I'm going to shoot him on his right pocket to hit him in the chest.
No.
You're not going to be able to remember to do any of that stuff. Like I said, there's only 2 rules in a gunfight. So you have to have all the advantages you can, because you don't, like Masad Ayub said one time, you can't predict where it's going to occur, gunfight's going to occur, what time of day it's going to be, where it's going to be at, what the weather's going to be like, who you're going to fight, what they're going to be armed with, what their skill level is. There's so many things you can't control. The only thing you can control is the gun that you're carrying, the ammunition that you have in the gun, and your skill with the gun. Those are the only three things that you can control in a gunfight, and your own physical conditioning. Those are the things you can control. Everything else is out of your control. So the things you can control, you better have a damn good gun with damn good ammunition and have a lot of practice and confidence with it. Because that's what you can control.
Yeah, I know. It's we're gonna with these podcasts, we're gonna address every nook and cranny of the shooting industry in America and see if we can't restore, make shooting great again or make shooters great again. I mean, we have slipped so far. Guns are evil, and we get to hear about gun violence. They never talk about golf club violence or car violence or hammer violence, but if somebody gets shot with a gun, it's gun violence.
Or kitchen knife violence.
What kind?
Kitchen knife violence. I mean, there's more people killed with a 10-inch chef's knife than probably anything else in America.
Probably because it's handy.
Handy.
And so this is all social engineering. It's not by accident. The major media companies, the major news groups, perpetrate it, and they do it at the behest of their masters, the politicians. And it's time to reverse that. My high school had a shooting range at the high school.
Wow.
And as a PE class, you could take basic shooting. I mean, it was an elective that you could take.
Wow.
And after World War II, almost all the high schools had shooting ranges in them. And you could get almost free Army surplus M1As, all kinds of, Army surplus guns. 1911s, I think, were like $10 or $11.99 or something. I mean, and they had shooting programs in the country. Why? Because we were in a war where it would have benefited us greatly if we could have taken our young people that we were putting in military service right into military service. They already knew which end of a gun a bullet came out of. And so the government saw great value in getting these surplus war guns into the hands of shooting groups, including high schools, and teaching kids to shoot. And that needs to be restored. There's nothing any more evil about a gun than there is about the sofa I'm sitting on. Both are completely inanimate. And if you don't think I can kill you with a sofa, I can. I figure out a way. I'm not sure how. But that doesn't make it a sofa violence. I mean, so we want to change these trends, and I want to have another podcast with you when you're ready and get into depth on. I really am intrigued by your history and how you lived in a car for a while, and you've been an independent fighter, and I don't mean physical fighter. You've been an independent fighter your whole life. You went from rags to riches. And probably the reason I like you most is because a lot of people don't like you. And I'm just like, hey, you don't even know the guy. So what? So he's outspoken. You think he's bragging? How else is he going to tell you what he's accomplished without telling you what he's accomplished? How's he going to do that? Send you a memo?
I was in real estate. One of my trainers, Don Austin, who's a very famous realtor in Santa Clarita area and very successful, owned 42 houses himself. And he taught a class on salesmanship. And he said, if you wait for someone to tell everybody how great and wonderful you are, you'll die of old age and you'll never hear a word. So you have to blow your own horn. So in real estate, he taught us that you had to tell people what you were capable of, what your education was, what your experience was, and why they should list their house or why they should buy with you and stuff like that. You had to tell them your chops, your qualities. And I did that, and when I transferred that over into the knife business, I found out that really offended a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I thought I was just, like you said, sharing my experiences, or when I talked, they thought I was just a braggadocio, not realizing that I was really talking authoritatively about the things I'd actually done or experienced or watched firsthand done.
Yeah, I know it. I know it's a very fine edge to walk. I guess I've reached a point where I don't even put myself in a position where I have to be very convincing. unless I'm doing a YouTube video, because I get sick of people misjudging me, thinking that my ego is bigger than I am, and I always want to do right. I always want to be right. If you're a mortal human, you're going to go through a lot of situations in life where you're dead wrong, and I'm more than willing. Yeah. Show me. You show me the first perfect mortal human being. I'd like to meet him. But anyway, so I just we have to talk authoritatively. We have to get to establish a basis for why anybody would want to listen to anything we have to say. But other than that, I'm fine keeping it to myself. Lynn, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
We'll do it again, and I miss seeing you. I should be seeing you more often than we see each other, but it's part of busy life. Hopefully we'll get a chance to go down to Argentina, early December, and hopefully we'll see you in Africa next winter in America, summer in Africa.
I'm planning on it.
Yeah, just come stay as long as you want.
If you come hunting with me in Argentina, you have the most fun you ever had in your life with your pants on. I guarantee you. It will be the best experience. The food, the accommodations, the birds, the shooting, everything. It's so good. I just can't describe it, how much fun it is.
Do we have somebody there that can take the time out to work with my inexperienced wing shooting wife? She
100%.
doesn't. She needs somebody to work with her, because I'll just be wanting to shoot, and that doesn't do her any good,
I'll arrange for a trainer. There's one of the professional hunters that's a really, really good handgun and shooting competitor, and I'll make sure that I'll try to get him on her staff so that he can coach her the whole time. If not, I'll coach her too.
Well, because that's one thing
too.
She will benefit hugely from the experience. I mean, she just wants to go see Argentina anyway, and Kim is more of a world traveler than I am. Before I ever met her, she is flying all over the globe.
Is Kim a foodie like me?
A fruity?
A foodie. Is she a foodie? Does she like food?
She likes food, but she can't eat very much. She takes 4 or 5 bites and she's so full she wants to puke.
So, but she will like it just for the food and the wine and the desserts. Everything there is awesome.
Well, and we'll give her lots of wine. She's 10 times more fun when you give her lots of wine.
There you go.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. She'll benefit greatly from it if she can get some training out of it. But it'll just take, kind of a patient guy that doesn't have an agenda other than helping her.
We'll set her up correctly with the right pat on her shoulder, gloves on her hands, a 20 gauge Benelli instead of a 12, and I'll make sure that she has her stance right and all of her stuff right so that she has the best chance. And it's the volume of shooting. I guarantee you that she's going to come back a remarkably good shot after 6 days. Blow your mind away.
That'd be great. We'll do a little shotgunning here off the back porch before this time. We'll shoot some clay pigeons and stuff. We shoot here off the porch. But she just doesn't have much shotgun experience. We'll get some of that in, but it won't be enough to do anything other than familiarize her,
Well, again, that's why I go to Argentina, try to go every year, because where else am I going to take the time to shoot 7,000 shotgun shells?
That's just way too much fun. She just handed me a note, and she doesn't know that I already talked about all this. But our podcasts and our videos are going to be on Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and our affiliate partners. We are selling gear that we review that we like. Our affiliate partners are Midway USA, Sportsman's Warehouse, can't read that one, Shields, Palmetto State Armory, Kafaru. And
On our website.
you just go to Buffalo Boar Outdoors and you can book safaris with us. You can go to any of those stores and buy right on the internet. And if I didn't say all that, I'd hear about it as soon as you and I are done talking. So anyway, yeah, we got to talk about that stuff. Lynn, I love you to death, brother.
Thank you. I love you too.
You've been better to me than most people that I know, intimately. And you and I, while we've been friends, we haven't done a lot of stuff together or anything.
I recognized your brilliance when you were first introduced to me at the Shooters Holiday in the early 90s. And I said, there is a very unusual, talented guy that people don't get because they were jealous of you and afraid of you.
Isn't that weird?
You were very physically strong. You're really a good boxer. You were a really good shot. You were all the things that some people are afraid of. And I feel the same way.
Do you know I've never been jealous of another human being in my life? I don't know how to feel that feeling. I understand it, but when I see somebody that's better than me, smarter than me, richer than me, whatever, I'm proud of them. I'm happy for them. I have never in my life understood the jealousy thing.
I'm not jealous of Jerry Mikulek. I look up to him.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that he's done, and same thing with Ross Seifried. He's the one that got me into handgun hunting. He was a big inspiration to me, his exploits. I'm not jealous of what he's done. I was just saying, wow, I want to set my standards that high. I want to go after and see how far I can approach them. Now, I've never approached Jerry Mikulek seriously and his abilities. He's the best in the world, but I aspire to.
Sure.
I'm not jealous of him, but I admire him, and I want to be that good.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys like Ross Seifried, he actually helped me get a start when I was starting my ammo company just by giving me some technical advice on loads. And there's been a few of those. Brian Pierce, big time. I probably learned more from Brian than anybody, but I have never in my life been jealous of another human. I don't understand how to be. I'm just happy for them. And like you said, I aspire to be as good as... My problem is if I aspire to do something, I'll go do it. And those are lifelong journeys, some of them. And so I have to be really careful to what I aspire to because my
when I first met Tim Wells, I said, I'm going to be as good as him with a bow someday. And then after training with him for a week, I realized that the only difference between me and him was 4 million arrows he shot. And I wasn't going to catch up in my lifetime, but I still try to be good.
Yeah.
I still want to be an awesome archer. But I thought to myself, I could catch him. And then I realized, no, I can't.
Well, brother, I appreciate the time. It's been a really, really good chat. And we will talk again real soon. And thank you for everything, Lynn.
You bet. Anytime I can help you, I'm down.
God bless.
All right. See you guys later. Thanks for
care.
everybody watching. Appreciate you.
We do. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.